Unfiltered opinions.
Sometimes you have ideas and you're not quite sure why.
As you secure the bag.
Sometimes you meet people and realize there's probably a reason why you stayed in touch.
Just listen.
Sometimes all the pieces just come together by themselves.
I'm Jimmy Moyaha.
And I'm Simon Brown.
Welcome to Insider Exchange.
Good morning. Welcome to another episode of Insider Exchange, brought to you live every Monday and with following episodes later in the week. In Market Matters this week, we are going to be taking a look at the upcoming Monetary Policy Committee rates decision that is going to be coming out of the MPC, or the Reserve Bank rather, in South Africa. We're also going to be taking a look at our budget reflections from last week's budget speech that finally made it. Well, we don't yet know if it's made it over the line because it still needs to be voted on. But the third budget speech has taken place. We're going to be reflecting on that. We're also going to be taking a look at PCE data, personal consumption expenditure data out of the US, as that is their preferred measure of inflation. And sticking with the US, Fed Chair Jerome Powell spoke last night. We're going to be taking a look at that and seeing what he had to say. That's a lot to get through from a market's perspective, and the week has only just begun. I mean, markets have opened today, markets opening in bullish territory. Well, especially if you're a Sasol shareholder, it's nice to get a 4 billion rand settlement every now and then. Share price moves up quite nicely.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge, of course, is that nice for Sasol shareholders, not so nice for Transnet, although they just got 51 billion from government. So hey.
Yeah, so I was going to say, Transnet's not really got too much of a problem here. They're just going to pass the bill on to someone else.
You and I.
Yes.
And of course, the last time the government had to pay over was Comair, and that didn't work. But that was a different story. And our top 40 all-time highs, that's quite sweet.
Yeah. It's a good start to the week.
Okay, we've come back a little. We were at all-time highs 20 minutes ago.
And the rand was at 1780 at some point between Friday and today. 1780. Now, granted, today at the moment we're where are we now? We would be 86. Okay,
86 and a half.
Yeah, but still 1780 after last week's meeting at the White House.
After all of last week, inflation, budgets,
everything, we got down to 1780.
And the rand's like, meh. Yeah. Gold, Friday close, all-time closing, weekly closing high. Yeah.
Good. Markets are just having a good time at them. Well, certain markets. Dollar index is back at 98 points, which is kind of the low it's been at. It's that April low that we saw. But from a bigger picture perspective, if we kind of break that April low of 97.50 and we head towards, say, 95, we wouldn't have been there since December 2021. So still not a lot of confidence in the dollar at the moment, but that's an update on markets at the moment. I want to look at budget because that was
a lot of palaver for not very much.
Did we need 3 attempts? I don't think we needed to go through this 3 times to arrive at such a mediocre outcome.
Correct. The problem is that in budget one, it got presented like this is what we're doing, 2% VAT. There was no negotiation and stuff. And I think this is the ANC learning how a government of national unity works. When you are a 40% party,
you are no longer a majority.
Yeah. In the olden days, you put out a budget and all your cadres voted for it and everything was fine. Suddenly they're learning, no, this is not how it rolls. And in fact, the minister has said ahead of the budget, he said that because the budget process starts at around the October with MTBPS.
Yes.
And it's a sense of, well, maybe we should start including people from then. It's like, maybe.
Considering you won the election in May, so you knew going into last year's MTBPS that you wouldn't have the majority coming into this year's February budget. Yeah. You could have started it in October of last year.
Yeah. Interesting. So Tony Leon's got I think it's a biography out, and there was an excerpt somewhere I read, and he talks around the whole process of building that GNU last year. And if you remember, Floyd Shabangu called for a toilet break, and that's when they signed it. No toilet break, no small bladders win the world. But he was saying, you know what, it was a disaster, which is what in other words, if the ANC went left with MK and EFF versus a deeply inferior, deeply flawed sort of document and status. But we kind of are learning, although we shouldn't be. I mean, there were coalitions in the Western Cape and Cape Town 20 years ago. But it is kind of getting that sense of how it all works. And to the point, a whole lot of 3 months of trauma. And what we also now understand is that it's still good. So we always thought that the budget, oh no, that the speech is just, it's like actually now it's got to go into committee and then it's got to get voted on. We learned a whole lot.
It has been a very learning kind of
I'd
6
rather
months.
be ignorant.
Speaking of things that we have learned, side quest quickly while we have this, we are learning that it takes a lot more than a couple of mentions to get someone to get your attention. But we are also learning that you can pretty much put anything on a cup, really, if you wanted to. But this is, of course, in line with what is happening this week. Insider Exchange will be at the Finance Magnates Africa Summit in Cape Town. We spoke about that last week, and we'll remind you again at the end of the show that if you are in Cape Town, we'd love to see you there. Back to what we are looking at. So budget, anticlimactic, but that now means between budget and inflation, this week we've got Monetary Policy Committee. MPC meets on Tuesday, get a decision on Thursday. Inflation came in at what, 2.8 versus 2.7?
Inflation is so the idea is that the Deputy Minister of Finances, now was it Deputy Minister? Someone was floating the
David Masondo.
Yeah,
That's
what is
Deputy
he?
Minister.
Okay. And he floated the idea of redoing the inflation targeting. It should be 3%, etc., etc. We're below the target. We're not even at yet.
Ooh, much to the joy of our central bank governor, Malumela Sitjakganyago, because he's been speaking about this as well, saying that it's better to anchor inflation at that lower point. It makes us more competitive globally, blah, 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 blah. Now, that's good and well in theory to do. And I actually think it might be somewhat easier to maintain and to get right given the current situations, right, in the country. But let's go down like a dream path. Just dream with me for a moment here. South Africa achieves economic growth.
I know this friend.
Yeah, but you haven't seen this friend in how many years? 20, right? So South Africa somehow gets into a state where the economy starts to move the way it should, or the way it is capable of moving. And that happens after you've revised your inflation targeting down and all of that. Initially, the short-term reaction from an inflationary perspective, of course, is demand-side inflation is going to return, and you will see that push inflation back up. That doesn't necessarily mean that the central bank would then need to hike rates, right? Because a growing economy is a good thing. At the point where we are now, and let's say we reduce inflation anchoring down to 3%. We're at 2.8%. Does that still not warrant a rate cut?
Yeah. I mean,
Thursday. Yeah.
This Thursday.
Just now.
And to be clear, our current target, as the minister always reminds us, is 4.5. He's not interested in this range thing. And truthfully, he stuck onto that when it was like close to 6. It's like, anyway. And now his challenge is to, 0.5%. Come on. Anything less than 0.5% is just murderous.
Do you think we could get that? Because I'm looking at you and I'm thinking that is an ambitious number. I thought maybe 25 basis points.
It's probably going to be 25. It's almost certainly going to be 25, right? Because that's
but let's look at the rationale behind it. Inflation is down. The rand is stable, so you are maintaining the rand stability at 1780. Fuel inflation is moderating because the crude oil price, realistically, no matter what the Central Energy Fund wants to tell us, hasn't gone sustainably above $70 for quite some time. So if they use these average prices and all of that, and perhaps we'll look at that at one point as to how they actually calculate it, if we can find the data. But fuel inflation is under control. Food inflation is under control. Electricity inflation is never under control because of nurses' tariff hikes. So let's just give up on that.
Yeah. No, and that's not going to happen.
Just leave that one, right? But all of the other factors point to the fact that we can actually get a rate cut. And we've seen other economies do rate cuts. Granted, some economies like the United States haven't, and again, our central bank governor also says he doesn't base his decisions on what is happening in the United States.
But he's also then, so he doesn't, but if the rate differential becomes too much, it could potentially weaken our currency. They are also worried about the rand. and what could happen to the rand.
But
to
Donald
your
Trump
point,
can weaken our currency.
yeah,
You don't need a rate
well, it
differential
turns
to do
out
that for
he's
you.
good for our currency.
Turns
I mean,
out he's great at the moment.
we're at 1780.
Yeah.
Well, actually, so as who was it who on Friday, their Treasury Secretary said, no, it's not the dollar's weak, it's all the other currencies are going up. And then somebody, Rikus Riedis, says, yeah, my boat isn't sinking, the ocean's just rising. Whatevs. I mean, they're weakening their currency. And there's an argument that says Trump likes a weaker dollar because it makes them more competitive.
But it also, as we have outlined in one of our previous episodes, means you can refinance your debt at a lower rate. It looks better from that perspective. So maybe this is the tactic from a refinancing perspective. We know that the US recently passed a bill around their debt management and those sorts of things. I didn't quite read that, but if I'm not wrong, it was something to do with effectively just continuing to increase the debt ceiling if they need to.
As and when needed.
Okay, cool. So I didn't miss
Pretty
anything
much.
there.
Yeah. But I mean, so the 10 years now sticky above 4.5. The 30 years sticky above 5, as is the 20. I mean, even if you get down to the 3 year, that's 3.968 is the lowest. I mean, they're in a heap of pain. We know what the answer is: more income, which is tax, or less spending, and well, neither are happening.
And add to that, the president of the United States wants to reduce certain taxes for certain individuals. So he wanted to afford tax cuts. I'm not sure if it's to corporates or to wealthy individuals. So he's been wanting to do that for the longest time anyway. Perhaps he's just planning ahead for post-government life and which tax bracket he'll be taxed in there. But it's a smart way to do it, right? If I know which tax bracket I'm going to end up in and I have the ability to change how much tax I'm going to pay at that point.
Well,
May as well.
Yeah, I mean, except his money's now all in crypto, and which is like completely, well, it's not anonymous, but, and you can't.
Trump coin.
Yeah.
The thing is there, I don't know how much of his money is in crypto, because to set up a coin, and we said we'd do this just as an exercise, and perhaps we'll do it as a social experiment, to set up a meme coin or a coin of your own, you don't really need a lot of capital investment.
Oh, you don't
se.
need, no, Trent, there's a website out there. I went and had a look-see. The hard part was the logo. Like really, like the hard. And then I remembered ChatGPT and DALL-E 3, and I'm like, oh, that's not hard either.
That's not hard either, yeah.
So you can set up anything. And what they do is, so because they're junk meme coins, they don't trade on real exchanges. So this platform then trades them for you, and they take a slice of the trading action. So that's where all your pump and dumps come from. What do they call them? Rug pools.
Rug pools.
Rug pools, because
Yeah.
these people are classy. They don't pump and dump, they rug pool. But then, I mean, Saudi, who's giving him a jet?
Qatar. No, Simon. Qatar is giving a jet to the Pentagon, not to President Trump.
Well,
he
until-
just so happens to keep it after he leaves office.
Well, and then it goes to his library. The man's never been to a library in his life. But the bigger point is that if they're giving him a jet, which I read a story, which is surely a what's the thing, a conspiracy theory, but apparently the jet's been parked somewhere for ages and actually costing them money, and this is just like getting rid of an expense. But then surely they could also slip him a couple of 100 million dirhams, whatever their currency is, at the same time into an unnamed dirham account somewhere in...
No, they've given him $4 billion worth of land to build a golf course on.
There we go.
Different way of moving around
Different
money.
way of doing it, yeah.
But yes, no, it's not a tender, folks. It's not a tender. Let's take a look at Jerome Powell while we have time. He spoke last night.
Yeah.
We expect President of the ECB, Christine Lagarde, to speak as well. And of course, we touched on our own central bank speaking. Markets, obviously, with Jerome speaking last night and going into this week, PCE data coming out at the end of the week, from a US perspective, they would want to see what's happening there, and that then affects how they are looking at things. And Jerome Powell has said it before. He wants to see the impact of these tariffs on the US economy before making a rates decision.
Yeah, and exactly. I mean, he needs to see something. The expected for PCE this week is that it moves higher, which delays rate cuts from him. He also went quite aggressive on his response to the pandemic, taking rates to zero. He's like, that was the right response. And he also went quite aggressive on independence of central banks, because, of course, Trump called him a fool or something. I forget the language.
Wasn't nice words.
Yeah, so he pushed back hard. But you know what? Jerome Powell's in there until middle of next year. There are ways Trump could fire him, but it would end up in court and he would probably lose. So he's got another year and he's going to do it the right way, which is wait for the evidence to show him that it's time to cut rates some more.
Not evidence of the DRC, not South Africa, and then actual correct, empirical evidence.
Verified, empirical. There's
okay.
the word
Okay.
that doesn't get into the Oval Office very often. Yeah. So he wants to see the real McCoy.
Yeah.
And then he will respond accordingly. And the truth of the matter is that, I mean, if you remember beginning of last year, 6 rate cuts coming. Well, we never got that last year. The thing with inflation is that it's easy to get down at first and then the last bit's hard. And we were in that last bit is hard part. And that's when central bankers get very careful and stuff, and et cetera, et cetera. And then 20 January happened. And now the threat to inflation is to the upside. And not pandemic levels, not necessarily 9%, but certainly away from that 2% target, which, to be clear, they're not at.
Those folks that have just joined us on our live stream, Jimbo's asked what our Starbucks names are. And this week, as we said, I am FMAS because the Finance Magnets Africa Summit is taking place at the end of the week or later in the week, and we will be there. And you can pretty much put anything on a cup. So Simon this week.
I'm Simone. So how did they get FMAS right and they can't get Simon right?
It was a social experiment to see how they could spell it. So, tell us your Simone story, because you've got a Simone story. So this name is not far out.
So I'm actually going to go way back to my high school when there were 3 Simon Browns in my year, which created all levels of complexity. It was a big school. In standard 6, what's that, grade 8, there were over 200 boys. By the time we got to matric, there were 150. And there were 3 Simon Browns. Anyway.
Simon. What are the odds? At the same school, at the same time in the school.
And we were totally different. Like there was the clever one, the stupid one, the middle one. Like we were totally different.
Which one were you?
I'm not commenting. And then I joined Standard Bank and they issue a press release. And there's this Simone Brown so it's Simon Brown, but an E on the Simon and an E on the Brown. Simone Brown, they're so excited, has joined Standard Bank, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, this is going to be really awkward because there's a Simone Brown and there's a Simon Brown. And I'm so glad, and it turned out it was typo.
Turns out, did you not find it strange that the Simone Brown joined in the exact same department that you joined in at as well?
No.
Well, to be fair, no. After going through 3 Simon Browns in high school, you're like, this is a small world.
Yeah. So there's also a bit of backstory. My first day, I arrived 7 hours late for work because I'd been in Cape Town the day before. My flight had been cancelled. So I was never supposed to arrive on time, but I was even extra late. So I never went through the induction process and all of that. So I don't know who else was joining Standard Bank that day. I mean, I know nothing.
I just showed up here. I just work here.
Yeah. So I was the smart one at school.
There we go. We got the answer. The real Simon Brown. Yes. Thank goodness we got that, Simon. Folks, that is Market Matters. We're going to leave the show on that note. But what we are going to get into in our deep dive is we're going to be diving into car financing. Should you get a balloon payment on your vehicle? Or should you finance your car in alternative means? And those sorts of questions and conundrums. A spoiler alert. I'm going to share why I think you should get a balloon payment on your vehicle. But that's for the deep dive. That's coming up next. That's going to be out later in the week. So make sure not to miss that. Shout out to our TikTok community for joining us. As always, we love you guys. You guys keep us going as well. But that's Market Matters for this week. We're going to get into the deep dive.